Welcome to RECO12. My name is Justin, and I am a child of an all-powerful and all-loving God and a recovering addict, and am blessed to be the host of this meeting and podcast. RECO12 is an organization with the mission of learning and sharing the similarities of addiction of all kinds, and gaining and sharing tools and hope from others who are walking a similar path. We come together from all places, faiths, and backgrounds to gain tools and hope from others who are walking this path. Speakers from our past meetings have represented so many fellowships, addictions, and afflictions, and we look forward to continuing to add to the diversity of speakers and backgrounds. Today's speaker for the 154th RECO12 speaker meeting is Leo B., and his topic will be surrender. We'll get to his talk in the Q&A afterwards in just a minute. First, for some business. Recently, a new service in the family of the growing RECO12 family of recovery resources went live. It's another recovery meeting podcast called RECO12 Shares. Now, RECO12 Shares is an open to anyone, anytime, shares only, unaffiliated 12-step meeting. All are welcome to record a solution-based share that is uploaded to be part of a short 20-minute recovery meeting available in podcast format anytime, anywhere. To listen to the first 4 episodes of RECO12 Shares, or to learn more and record a share of your own, please visit www.reco12.com/shares, and I'll put that link in the chat here in a few minutes. Or click the links in the show notes of the live meeting if you're or the show notes of the podcast if you're listening in podcast format. There are also a couple of other RECO12 family of recovery resources on the horizon that I'm really excited about. These adventures and projects I believe are being guided by higher power, directing RECO12 into those projects. And I think there's going to be some really cool stuff. RECO12 is a self-supporting service, and we appreciate your help in keeping us working our 12th step in this manner. We gratefully accept one-time contributions through PayPal and Venmo through the links that will be in the chat and the show notes. We also have started a new monthly subscription program called RECO12 Spearheads. To join in and help support these cool projects, please consider donating at reco12.com/support, or click on the link that will be in the chat of the live meeting and the show notes of the podcast here in a few minutes. We look forward each week to receiving from the light reflected from our speakers. That light inspires hope, meaning, worth, and growth in us, the listening audience. Now I'll introduce today's guest speaker. He's another first-time speaker, Leo B., and I got to know him a few years ago through a two-way prayer group that we were in together. So here's a little bit about Leo B. Leo came into NA in 2018 and has stayed clean for more than 4 years now. He came to the point when he became sick and tired of being sick and tired. Leo spent a lot of time trying to find the solution, both while using and while staying clean. It ended up being a long journey searching for the secret recipe of recovery, some sort of philosophical stone. He tried to find the perfect sponsor, perfect books, perfect step working method, and even the perfect religion. All of these attempts eventually failed. After a long period of depression and after all his ideas let him down, he finally started to develop a real contact with his higher power, gods of his understanding. He feels home now, even thousands of miles away from his homeland. Take it away, Leo. It's your turn.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Justin. Yeah, I'm Leo. I'm a recovering addict, originally from Moscow, Russia. Now I do live in Turkey. And first of all, I want to say that I'm really grateful for this possibility, for this opportunity to share my experience, strength, and hope, even worldwide. You know, it's so weird. You know, it feels weird sometimes. Leo goes worldwide, kind of thing, you know. Yeah, something I could not even imagine, 5 years ago, or let's say 10 years ago, happening, being part of fellowship, loving fellowship and stuff, So yeah, my topic is about surrender. And first of all, I will share a bit about myself, maybe a few minutes. Pretty much I felt myself different from the very beginning of my life. I felt myself alienated. I felt myself unique and special. And I felt myself really really different from other people, you know, and if I guess that I was broken since the beginning of my life, but maybe the main break happened when I was a teenager, and somehow I came to idea that I want to become a rock star. I want to like be like Kurt Cobain, you know, people like that, Jimi Hendrix, and it was simple for me, you know. My mind was really simple about it. It was like, yeah, they are playing guitar, they're rock stars, they're doing drugs. So this is a whole recipe and can work for me, you know. So I've tried to do this, you know. I could not really make a logical kind of line between misery and drug using. And everyone, and let's say like almost everyone around was saying like, don't use drugs, it's bad. Don't use drugs, it's bad. And when I first used drugs, I was like, you people are crazy. How this thing could be like really bad. You know, it was the greatest experience in my life. Because at that moment, I didn't know what addiction was about, you know, and what it would happen with me, what would happen with me. And basically, you know, it started to like the desire to kind of relax, you know, would be to maybe get some inspiration, to play guitar. But after a few years, it became my main business. Using became my main business. I sold my guitar, you know, I sold all equipment. And most important, it actually burned out all my creativity, all my desire to live, actually. And yeah, I don't know, like I've got a lot of war stories, you know, I don't want to share them. I don't believe this is the purpose of this meeting, you know. I would better focus on where I came. And I came to the point of real desperation at some moment, you know. I've tried to stay clean on my own. I relapsed, and actually it was the first idea on surrender. I didn't even know at that time it was like that. It was called that I found myself into mental institution. Actually, it was like that, you know. I came to the drummer of my rock group I used to play with, and we used drugs for a few, like maybe days, and I had voices and psychosis. And after that, I came to my mom and I said to her, like, I'm an addict. I don't know what to do. It was like, because for years I tried to cover all of that, you know, and then it was the first admission. And I went to mental institution because I could not handle anything, you know. And I remember, like, I was sitting there and doctor was looking at me and he was like, he was asking me some questions and I was sharing, like, look, doc, you know, it's like, this is drugs, this is power, and I'm powerless, you know. I had no idea about 12 steps at all at that moment, you know, but I was already sharing about powerlessness, all these ideas, you know. And then after being for a month there, I went to my very first NA meeting, and it was the first time I've actually identified myself as an addict. I came there first time and said, I'm Leo, I'm an addict. And I finally started to somehow match up with how I felt myself. I felt myself so different for the most of my life, you know, and I found myself a room full of people who also experienced that. I was like, oh my God, I'm not alone. And also they had something, and I wanted it. I wanted to stay clean. It was my dream, you know, to stay clean, to find people who also desired to stay clean, you know. And first surrender kind of was easy. I was broken. I was completely broken. You know, I just went out of mental hospital. I had no idea what to do, how to live. The same drugs are everywhere, the same people, you know, and I received a few simple suggestions, you know, about going to meetings, finding a sponsor, like, you know, like regular stuff, you know. There are no secrets in these 12-step fellowships, right? You know, we almost all of us, we know everything since the beginning. I mean, like formal, like these actions, you know, go to meetings, do service and stuff. And I started to do. I was really believer because I came so sick and tired from being sick and tired. I came so broken, So also I came from a religious background, so it was not so complicated for me because I was like, yeah, it was not like 10 commandments, but it was more like 12 steps, some holy books, blue book, it spoke to me. I was really easy about it, I took it easy. And I had great expectations also. And I thought that this is a kind of race. This is a sprint race, and when I finish these 12 steps, my life gonna change for better, and that's it. That's over. This is what I wanted, But after maybe first year of clean time, I finally started to realize that maybe the whole thing was not about drugs. I've heard about all of that maybe, thousands of times, about it's addiction. We are powerless over addiction, it's not about drugs. And I was like, yeah, but I never felt it really. And after a while, I started to feel it. I found myself being clean, even more miserable than I was when I was using. I felt so much shame and guilt, and I spent a lot of time trying to find sort of solution. I tried to I had no other ideas actually as to rely to some books, to some people. This is what I did the most part of my life, because I obviously I was needed cash, I was needed connection, and I was connections, and I was needed drugs, and I did know how to get it, so I felt that maybe this 12-step recovery is somehow similar, so I have to get connections in recovery, I have to work the steps so I will get like free high, this kind of stuff. And I tried to rely on different books or in different people, because obviously some sort of gurus appeared on my way, I guess it's not very uncommon, right, in 12-step fellowships, because I found some defect of character, later on, that I really got some sort of religious fanaticism. I need a guy saying to me what to do, what to think, and what is right, because I tend to go away from responsibility. This is my natural desire. It's hard to take responsibility for what I think, for what I do, for what my life is about, So this I've tried. I found some sort of cult, so what do you call it, cliques? Yeah, I don't know. In a 12-step fellowship, in different fellowships, different step working methods. Try to change it, and then I came to the point where I was so depressed, and I lost, because in the beginning of my recovery, I felt some contact with a higher power. It was not so complicated for me. I was like, oh yeah, I stayed alive. I saw people dead, from this disease. I stayed alive somehow, and I came to this beautiful fellowship. I'm surrounded by people willing to help, so what else to desire? But then after years going to the rooms, I started to become envy, started to look at differences rather than similarities, what car this guy have, this guy has, what girl is around, what about this new sneakers, new money, it looks like this self-centeredness restores pretty quickly. And I being angry and sad at the same time and depressed, I've lost all contact I had before, really. And I was angry. I was angry even towards God of my understanding because of losing this contact. It was a moment where I started to realize that maybe I have no control over it too. Maybe I'm powerless over it too. So I went to another extreme, and I was like, oh yeah, higher power betrayed me. I have no contact with a higher power, so I'm gonna find a contact with a lower power. It was like I'm talking about it because it really shows a lot about this spiritual kind of thirst, spiritual I was hungry spiritually. I wanted this contact because I already knew that solution lies somewhere there. I just didn't know how to get it. And I went to lower power, and I even went into devil worship because I was like, oh my God, yeah, it's, if the good way doesn't work, maybe I have to try bad way, so to speak. And I had a meeting with my sponsor today, and I remember, and I had a meeting with a sponsor this week, and I was reading my examples from the first step, and I came to the point where it was like when I wanted to set my apartment on a fire. I wanted to set fire in my place because everything was so bad, and I took Living Clean in a book, and I started to burn it, because I wanted to make it, beautiful. Like I had a lot of candles, this darkness around, these paintings of devil, yeah. So definitely it's not about drugs, okay? I was clean for a few years. I was in a program, or I thought I was in a program. I went to the meetings, I did a lot of service. Yeah, this is a real moment when I started to realize, yeah, maybe it's not about drugs. And it did not, now I know that it's about surrender, But at that moment, it did not feel like that. It felt like the worst moment maybe of my life, actually. And luckily I called some guy, during the process of setting fire in my place, and he was like, he told me something about God. I was extremely angry, what God, what we talking about? And but he somehow distracted me from this idea. I was angry towards him, not about my apartment, so I quit the fire, and I didn't burn my apartment to the ground, which was really good. And that was the moment where after that, it took time, to ask for help. I was like, I really decided. We had a beautiful prayer in the beginning about set aside prayer, and I started to setting aside my ideas about how I should recover, what my life should be. I started to ask for help of professionals to seek for some sort of contact, like new with new ways, without old ideas in mind, without expecting that people gonna save me, like fellowship members gonna save me, or some holy book, recovery 12-step recovery book gonna save me, or this girl, or this money, because I went through all of these obsessions too, hoping it will help. And it's funny because it came to the childhood, actually, because when I was like younger, when I was maybe 8 or 9 years old, I had a book with about ancient Romans, actually, and ancient Greeks, and I enjoyed so much of it, when I was a kid, really. And then I opened it up, and I saw the picture of all gods together, and somehow something changed inside of me. Really, something changed inside of me. I started to realize that maybe it's not a good way, really to blame God, about everything. That maybe there are different areas of my life, different areas. And if I fail in some area, it doesn't mean I fail my whole life. And if I'm not doing super good in some area, it doesn't mean my whole life is shit. I started to change gradually. It was not like, it was not intellectual kind of exercise to surrender to reality, to surrender to recovery. But it was more like gradual kind of process of accepting who am I, where I go, actually, what is going on around. Well, like that, and now this last year, a lot of stuff happened in my country because our government, actually, government of my homeland, started war. I don't want to go in any politics about it, I just talking about myself, like I could not accept it. And it was really hard, it was really difficult to live in this, and at some point, I decided to leave my homeland, to leave Russia, to move somewhere else, because I felt myself extremely unsafe, and it was also guided, like surrender for me is also connected with the guidance. This is something I receive. I do practice two-way prayer. This is some form of meditation when you basically ask gods of your understanding something and then write down the answers you receive. It's basically an essence of this technique, and I received this inspiration and I was clearly led by my spirit, like there was like a lot of things happening at that time on Telegram, lots of chats, people discussing what's going on. It was last September, and I was like, yeah, I had to go. And somehow in dozens of all these chats, in thousands of messages, people trying to communicate, to go out together, I found some guy and I texted to him, and it ended up that he's living at the same street. Moscow is pretty big. It's like around 12 million people there. Many people wanted to go away, at that moment. And I clicked at this very message and I texted to a guy, and he was looking for companions, to go out together. And it ended up that he was living at the same street as me. So it was like, boom. Like, and I went, and I went through all, like, because we had a sort of crisis on the borders at that moment. It was like, I felt myself, it was a moment when I was in the car for 24 hours with him and other guy. And I just had no idea if I can easily leave Russia or not, because information changed all the time, news changed, and, there were rumors, and I spent 24 hours in a car. And also then 10 or 12 hours waiting in a line of people trying to cross the border, and I was completely powerless. I could not control it. I could only take some actions, and I spent like all this time praying, and I was like, okay, so what's next? And it was a moment, I don't know, like I feel, while sharing, I feel like I don't have enough words, to describe, this, it's always when it comes to some spiritual stuff, words are not enough. And the more you talk about spirituality, it feels like you're sharing less, it's hard to describe, how I felt, but it was fine. It went fine for me. I did what I wanted to do. I received some help. I crossed other borders. I came where I live now. And before the meeting, I actually shared about what I'm going through right now, because my mom went to surgery this week, and even if it was a bit planned, she's got a tumor. She had a tumor on her head, on her face, and we planned to do surgery for her maybe for a few months, but I didn't know exact date. We also go through other stuff, some business issues, and and then, like, she was like, yeah, I go to the hospital. And I would say to you that I've got no other family members, in Russia. I've got a girlfriend who lives in Russia too, but she lives in another town. And my mom and my dad died when I had like months clean, and I did not relapse, actually. It was the first sign that this program works. I was like, okay, because I didn't call to my connections, I called an ex-addict, to share when my father died, because it happened in my eyes. Anyway, and I found myself like really anxious about my mom. She called me and she was like, yeah, I'm in a hospital. We do surgery today, and that's today, and I wanted really this idea, this is a program of surrender, right? This is not a program of control. And my natural desire is to control everything, to control what's going on in politics, what's going on in this country, what's going on in other country, what's going on with my girlfriend, what's going on with my mom, how about health, it's pretty exhausting, actually. It's super exhausting, So sometimes it's maybe not so bad at all to don't know stuff, actually, what's going on. Yeah, and so yesterday I spent like very anxious, and definitely it shows like every day there is something I can surrender. I can surrender to, or I can surrender about. It looks like there is 1 inch every day I can also surrender. I can give up a bit more and more and more every day. because before, when I first came into the rooms, I was more like, I thought it was like one time kind of action. I surrendered, boom, everything changed. But after years, I realized that it's a process. It's a gradual process of me taking new actions, of me taking care of others, of me taking care of myself, of trying to support my mom, even through this condition, And I found myself, like, to be honest, I found myself very, I've expected for myself to do better. I've expected that I will take it easy, but it's not. It's not. It's hard to talk about one spiritual principle. They're all interrelated and all connected. And I've also, when I left Russia, my mom was also very anxious, and I was a bit judgmental about her. About why you're so anxious? I'm fine. I'm not at war. Why are you so anxious? I'm doing good. And now I do realize that I don't worry so much for myself than how much I worry about others, how much I can worry about others, and especially about my mom. And I went really emotional about it. So I felt compassion and acceptance, and I finally started to realize how she felt when I left Russia. How she felt, and she's doing good actually. She gave me a call. She went through it, and also yesterday, the break was when I could not do it. Usually I do my two-way prayer in the morning because it's the best time when your head is a bit empty. And sometimes I procrastinate. I must be honest. Sometimes it's about doing it in the middle of the day or even in the evening, And I should say that it's better to do it in the evening rather than not to do it at all. So I was able to calm down, to write down certain things, to work my steps, to write down my guidance, and also about, I do have a few minutes.
Yeah, you've got about 3 more minutes.
3 more minutes, yeah, for the most important, about guidance and surrender. Like, yeah, I do receive this guidance. I do naturally, I'm resistant. I'm resistant to what I receive. Sometimes it's easier, it's very simple things. Call this person, go there, buy this, do that, but somehow it's the simplest things are the most difficult to follow, even if I know it works, because I used to practice it, it works. When I surrender to even unconscious, you can call it whatever, God's unconscious, whatever. When I surrender to this, my life goes better because there is something inside of me which is connected to God, which is connected to high power, which is better power, better side of me, better part of me. It's way better than the other part, who told me to use drugs, to steal, cheat, lie, to do all this business. There is some voice, I just have to listen to it, and surrender to what I hear. And obviously I do sort of things, if I receive, not every thought can come from a higher level, right? I can receive some crazy stuff, so I had to sort it out using some standards, sort it out. So it was pretty much, what I received. I was so anxious and panicking yesterday, and the guidance I received, it says, like, from a God, like, Leo, we love you, and you've got everything you need for today. And this was really important for today, because I'm like, yeah, I'm all in the future and the past, and for today, and what the next right thing in front of me, what it is really, maybe to do my dishes, maybe to call my mom, to call my girlfriend, to do something, to do something good, to take care of next addict, whatever, and yeah. So I feel like it's hard to share about spirituality at all. It's very hard. It's very difficult, It's the words cannot properly explain it, the whole experience about it, and I guess that seeking this surrender is a best thing I can do, and I could do in my life, because there is some part of me, I've got many kind of, you can call it subpersonalities or whatever, there is a little warrior inside, always saying, like, I'm gonna fight. And how it manifests, it's a fight in reality. It's not a real fight in reality. Mostly it happens in my head when I intellectually trying to overcome reality, to overcome all difficulties I meet in my life, like like difficulties in financial relationship, whatever, and I'm trying to overcome it intellectually. It never works. I cannot struggle with life in my head. I can only take next right action, and that's pretty much about it. And I let results be in the hands of a higher power, not in my hands. It sounds so easy, but it's not. It's very simple, but it's not easy. And I have to go to really deepest levels of desperation to come up to these ideas. And gradually they started to become sort of natural. I still got a lot of resistance. I don't want to follow guidance. I don't want to do something, but I know it works. It's most important that I know it works. And the more I surrender, the more I recover, actually. That's it.
Love it. Thank you so much, Leo. Good stuff. Really appreciate your share, your vulnerability, and your insights there on surrender and the the gods of our understanding. This is good stuff. A reminder to our live audience: if you have questions for Leo, type them in the Q&A link at the bottom of your Zoom window. Looks like two speech bubbles over the top of each other. And to all you newcomers, I think we've got a few newcomers. If you would like to get on the email list to join in on each week's meeting that we have, go to RECO12.com/join us, join-us, and join in. I look forward to seeing you here in the future. All right. So let's get to some questions here that we've got from the live audience, and I've written some down. This first question is from M. M says, did you change locations through your rediscovery of a higher power? Did you move physically during that time?
No, I've tried to find a solution, in a changing locations, but it was not in a rediscovery of surrender. It happened more in a process of searching for it. I was like, and I got example. I can go into example, okay? And then in Russia there is a great place called the Rostov the Great, which is there is sort of touristic route called Golden Ring. It's Golden Ring of ancient Russian towns, from like maybe medieval time. And there's a beautiful place, means beautiful lake, beautiful white Kremlin, white fortress. I really like this place. I was there several times, and it was a moment. And I was like, I was overwhelmed by job, by some issues, I was like, yeah, I'm gonna go there, and find some peace of mind, because actually it's all about finding peace of mind. I wanted desperately to find peace of mind. This is maybe I'm trying to calm down myself by drugs, this kind of stuff. And I remember how I came to this place, and I was walking around this beautiful lake. Everything was good weather, and I felt like, yeah, I gotta go to my hotel and commit suicide. And this was a moment when I realized, that maybe it's not about place at all. It's about place inside. It's not about place outside, really, and it's not about physical change of location. It's about. I've got a great metaphor. I've heard something from a friend. And I like it's like steps, like step one, okay, and I imagine myself like there's a long stairway, right? And I'm on step one, and there is step two, step three, and I'm climbing. And I'm like, oh yeah, and I'm climbing. And it's so complicated, it's so difficult, and I'm climbing. And she really was like, try to look at it like it's not a bottom step, but it's a highest step. And you go down to yourself. It's not about going outside, trying to climb down to reach this, to reach that, but go to inside, Yeah. This second surrender, whatever I can call it led me to live in a different place now. But I did not plan it. I had no ideas. I never planned to live in Turkey. This is how it worked,
I love that. And I love the what you shared about, hey, the outside location isn't going to change me. It's got to be the change inside that happens in. And then if the outside location changes, it's because the inside has changed and become more connected and knows where to go to have that, to maintain that peace. I love that. Thank you. Early on in your share, you mentioned, it was harder to be clean and sober in the early days than it was to be using. That the emotions, the difficulties that happened in your early times of being clean were really hard. Tell us a little bit more about that and how that turned you more to surrender.
Yeah, and I can share about my father's death. It was like a first challenge I met. And actually I had like maybe months of clean time. And I that was a moment where I lived with my parents still. And I came from the meeting and he died. Basically what happened? Suffocated. And an ambulance came and I could not do anything about it. And I was extremely shocked. It's just something you don't expect, especially when you go to the meetings and people sharing about gifts of recovery. And I got this and I got that. And I'm 1 month clean and I'm coming home from a meeting. And I have to say that the most painful about it that I just started to restore relationships with him, because it was just the very beginning, we started to talk eventually after years of this coldness, like a father and a son, like a dad and son. And in the moment when he died, I basically what came to my mind that I have to do a phone call. And also the other thing that happened the next day, I was extremely angry about the whole thing. Most of all, I was angry about how surprising it was for me. And I was like, no, something on my way. Like I wanted to restore this relationship. I came to NA. I realized, oh my God, I can restore my relationships. I can restore this, I can restore that. And then boom. And it happened. And I was extremely angry. And I wanted to somehow express my anger, really. And I took some glass jars and I went to outdoors and I wanted to smash them. And I took this glass jar and I smashed it on a row, but it's jumping into my own hands. It did not break. And I took another one and did it, again, and it did not. It just somehow jumped in my hands. And I really wanted to smash these jars. So I went to another place, I smashed all of them, experienced no relief. And I came back home. I did one more phone call. And a guy actually said that what really helps to him is to write. And I was my 1 month clean, I had no sponsor, no steps, no ideas, about what should I write actually. But I had a pamphlet called Triangle of a Self-Obsession, which is a pamphlet, short, brief pamphlet. And I wrote down, and I took a piece of paper, and I started just to write down what was on my mind. And I experienced a level of relief, which was like really outstanding comparing to what I felt when I smashed this glass, it somehow, it's a simple suggestion, do phone call, do some writing, even if I didn't know, write questions I should answer. Now I know this, questions, I wrote dozens of these inventories and stuff, but at the moment it was not important. It was important to express how I felt, express the fear I had about future and anger and resentment I had about the past, But also somehow this pamphlet talks about switching this triangle of self-obsession from resentment, anger, fear to acceptance, to love and to faith. Somehow where was my acceptance, that the time I had with my father was over. I could not do anything about it. Okay. But I do have some love in my life because I have to support my mom, because she also goes through this loss, through this incident, and what about faith, and I just really found, I just found this fellowship. I just found this ways of recovery. So I was able to somehow turn it over, maybe to somehow turn this triangle of resentment of the past, of anger from today, and a fear of future, because I could not I could not imagine my life without my dad, because he was with me all my life, but this is what helped, and maybe there was some point, and I started to see that some suggestions of this program work, and maybe I have to. It was not easy to accept all of that, but somehow it worked, it worked out, and there is somewhere in Moscow there is still this sheet of paper, there are my tears on this piece of paper, actually, because I was crying when I was writing down, but it somehow helped, to express the feelings I had, without using drugs or any substitutions at that moment, and even sometimes it feels like even in the beginning, it was easier to surrender than after years, because after years, my head recovers with me, it recovers simultaneously with me, I'm like, yeah, because my head knows everything I know, because I do read all these books, I'm listening to sponsored speaker tapes, I learned some experience. In the beginning, it was a bit even easier, in certain matters, I just had no experience, so I simply followed what I was told. And it worked, I stayed clean. So I was able to do it, up to this very moment. So that's it.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. Very, heart, there's the strings in my heart are being pulled. Thank you for sharing that. And, you mentioned something that, you had just come from an NA meeting where people were sharing the solution. They were sharing, hey, these promises are coming true in my life. Mm-hmm. Good things are happening. And you're sober and you're trying to get there, and you come home and what appears to be those promises not happening happens.
Yeah.
And you talk, practicing acceptance. I think as you wrote and shared that about practicing acceptance, it just really rang true to my soul. Thank you for sharing that. We have another question that just came in from the live audience. It says, how do you stay in your spiritual routine today? What are the actions for you to stay in that spiritual routine? And that's from M.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I guess that most important is two-way prayer. This something my relationships with this practice, with this technique, was not also easy. I used to practice it, and I used to quit it, and now I came to it again, and it's pretty simple. I grab some piece of some spiritual literature. I don't have much of literature right now with me. Basically, I'm reading like Narcotics Anonymous Grey Book or a big book, in English. I don't. Maybe it's weird, but I don't read the whole thing through. I'm just randomly open up the book somewhere, and I read a couple of paragraphs, and I have to say that most of the time it speaks to me. Most of the time that is random, no matter what, I was just, today it was like, there is a solution chapter from a big book. I opened it up, and I was like, yeah, it was like about, there is a solution. And then also it was about this businessman who went to Carl Jung for therapy, about finding this. So it's really, because I've also had then after some moment of reading, I do write some question. I've got to my higher power, some of my real need that I've got. And my need for today was like, because I was concerned about what should I share today about, and it's basically, it's really good to address it, not to my mind, but to this greater power, So I write down some questions, it's nice. Sometimes something what disturbs me, money issues, relationship issues, addictions, that are still with me, some obsessions I've got. And basically having it some quiet time. Basically breathing deeply and writing down everything I've got on my mind. And it's interesting that before I had really a lot of garbage on my mind when it came to this two-way prayer. It just was a lot, but after some time of practicing it, it started to change. I started to receive more and more, whatever I can call it, some, it's funny because sometimes answers are really kind of surfacing, and it's not answers even to the questions I've got. I cannot control it. It's very important that through this writing, I cannot control it. And I try not to control what I write in the morning, or sometimes in daytime. Sometimes it's simple things about where should I go, but sometimes it's about what book should I read, for example. What person I should call. And it's interesting because there was a person appeared in my writing like daily, but I refused to call this person. I didn't want. I got the number. It's easy. I've got WhatsApp. I can call like every day. But I was like, yeah, maybe it's just some bullshit. I don't have to follow it. And when I call this person, eventually, or texted somehow, I found that this member practiced two-way prayer too. I had no idea about it before. I had no idea, but it kept appearing in my guidance, like day by day. And I was like, no, not today. But then when I texted, and somehow I had a sort of insight. Do you know about two-way prayer? And this member told me, yes, I do. And I'm like, okay. There was a reason why I had to reach out. Yeah, this is the most important, I don't I do pray sometimes, I guess that for me, the best prayer is an action. It's the best prayer I can do ever. Someone called it like being living prayer. It's somewhat pathetic a bit, but, I'm an addict, and I can say whatever words if I want something, and this is what I went through, because I was like really stressing the prayer rather than meditation first years recovering, and I was like, yeah, if I want to find the right words to the God, I'm going to receive what I want. I want to receive this girl and I want to receive this money, this stuff. And I'm an addict and I can promise anything to get high, right? It's so natural for me, but not so. What is not natural is to take actions, to take actions, to receive some guidance, to reach out some person, for example, or to read some book that maybe have some answers for me, or to occupy myself with something. I don't know. It's funny because I find myself playing tabletop role-playing games. It's something really childhood activity. When I was a kid, I was the only kid, in a family, and I used to make myself some maps of unknown lands, writing down some stories, and it's like basically it's about inner child connections. It's what I didn't even think about it so much. It just came to me during this sharing. Yeah, there's somehow to connect with this inner child, to this little guy who wanted to do it, and it appears in my writing that play every day, play music, play some tabletop game, just, this is not like somehow like these answers are not something one can expect, like, go to this job, raise all this money, or go to get this girl, it's not like that. It's a bit different, but it's the main practice I've got now. And also and also staying clean, it's a big practice, it's a big technique, but most of all it's about two-way prayer. I try different things, I try to rely on the rites. I went to Hare Krishna temple. I went to Baptist church. I found myself in different places, during all these years, but these rites are good. It's good, but I have to find something that is mine, that speaks to me, that works in my life. And was like, I'm really grateful to my sponsor, because when we started to work the steps at this time, he told me that this is the most important, to come to a relationship with the higher power, because I went through all the steps technically before. Yes, because everyone can open up big book, and read, what you have to do when you retire at night, when you have to do upon the morning, all this stuff, pretty simple stuff, but I have also to find what works for me somehow. So this two-way prayer thing is really, really powerful, And it's also because it's also about conscious contact. When I'm down with my writing for today, I feel this contact. I feel that something inside me was speaking, Like, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I hope I answered somehow.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I have a follow-up question on the two-way prayer.
Okay.
Earlier on, you said, hey, to make sure that the guidance I receive is valid, to make sure it's not
Mm-hmm.
just me talking, or if it's not a lower power telling me to do things that I shouldn't be doing.
Mm-hmm.
You judge that against some standards. Talk to us a little bit about those standards that you use to confirm that, hey, this truly is guidance that's good or pure for me.
Okay. The standards, this is in a program, this is in a program. It is called spiritual principles. Actually, one can find, if I got, if there is something about being dishonest, to lie to someone, it doesn't come from right source, right? Or like to do something, to cheat on someone, to do some bad stuff, So more about it, and also I've mentioned that over the time of practice, it becomes natural, and it's also about not only about standards for me, but also about actually following guidance, I guess, because consequences of my actions, they speak for themselves. Really, I really have to learn. A big book says in an 11th step, I guess, that we just started to find this contact. We'll do mistakes, and I'm clean for like 4 and some years. It's not such a long term, and I will do mistakes. I just have to figure out, what speaks to me. Basically, technically, I go through this list of things I have. I watch for it. I think about it. Is it right thing or wrong thing? Is it in line with spiritual principles or not, or the principles of my life? And I've got a red ink pen. I circle it down, so I've got something to rely on. I was really concerned about it in the beginning. How do I actually how can I sort it out? What is from God? What is from not God? It was really early on. I had these problems, but no, it doesn't feel like that. If I have doubts about something, maybe the best thing is not to follow the whole thing, and just to wait. Because if this idea is good, it will be good tomorrow, and it also will be good next month and the next year even. If spirituality, does not depend on time, right? It's not about it.
Yeah, and absolutely. And I love that you referenced this from the big book. We might pay for, it's not probable that we are going to be inspired at all times, as we just started our contact here. We might pay for this presumption in all sorts of absurd actions and ideas. Nevertheless, we find that our thinking will, as time passes, be more and more on the plane of inspiration. We come to rely on it. I think you just shared that perfectly. And that's from page 87 of the big book. But love it.
I used to do absurd actions. I did it. And I guess it was fun, I received the guidance. I remember I received the guidance to go to feed the pigeons, for example, so the point, I'm not into birds, but right. It felt so good, really. It felt so good. It feels like absurd, to call someone, Sometimes it happens.
Love it. We got one more question from our live audience, and then we'll do a wrap-up question. We'll get going, closing this up. Did you experience a lot of relapse this is from M from the audience?
A relapse?
Mm-hmm. Did you relapse a lot?
No. I relapsed before I found a program. When I tried to stay clean on my own, it was in 2017. I was able to stay clean for a while, and I've met the same problems I met later on about depression, and I had no idea what to do. I knew about 12-step fellowship, but I never went there. So I called a so-called friend, and they had a solution right here on a hand. He gave it to me. I took it, and I spent next 7 months using more drugs than I ever used maybe in my life. When I was able actually to stop only in mental institution. They took my phone away, they locked me, and I was happy. I was so happy. They locked me up. Eventually I was so happy. Yeah, I'm safe. Yeah, but No, I do. Great book of Narcotics Anonymous speaks a lot about relapse, about other relapses, about not only physical relapses, but about emotional relapses, spiritual relapses. And emotional relapse is a pretty common thing, it's because it's emotional sobriety, about this emotional sobriety. It talks also about even environmental relapses. When I put myself in an environment which is dangerous for me. For example, I found myself in a forest, and we had a campfire with the guy with whom I used to use drugs. And he was sharing, oh, I did those beautiful mushrooms, last month. And I was like, yeah. And I used with this guy. And after I used with this guy, I went to mental institution, like crazy. It's clearly environmental relapse, So it's physical relapse. Maybe it's the last thing happening, but it's more, for me, it's very important for me to find this emotional stability or emotional sobriety, whatever you can call it, because without it, I'm so miserable. And this clean time means nothing, It's physical abstinence, and it's good for a body. But when I am into it, I go to destroy myself some other ways, I can go into food, watch porn, whatever, to play games, obsessively. I mean, not just for fun, but obsessively, to fill this void, inside, because this is, I relate to what I found, that when I'm emotionally about this emotional sobriety, this is I think I'm gonna share, that this is when I'm in self-pity or anger, it's like about being drunk or stoned. It's so similar because it's very similar because I do something, I have no idea what I'm doing. Sometimes I can't even remember what I did when I was under influence of self-pity or anger. It's so similar. I even experienced hangover kind of, later on, all of that. So this emotional stability part is very important. It's important to seek guidance, to seek higher power in my life, which is truly loving and careful. And that's it. Thank
awesome.
you.
Thank you for sharing your experience, strength, and hope, Leo. Very good stuff. Great wisdom. Appreciate it. That was a great RECO12 weekly speaker meeting. And if we didn't get to your questions, or if you have other questions, please consider joining our WhatsApp community by sending an email to RECO12pod@gmail.com and join our community there. If you're inspired and want to share something of your insights in a 12-step type share, please go to RECO12 Shares. Speak pipe link that I've got in the chat here in the live meeting. I'll also have it in the show notes, and record your 2 to 4 minute share there. If you've not yet rated and reviewed RECO12 in Apple Podcasts, please go do so now. It's a great way to work step 12 and sharing this message with others. I invite the audience to come back next week when we will be hearing from another RECO12 first time speaker, Peg O, whose topic will be higher and friendly powers. I'm reading her book right now of the same title and finding a lot of really interesting and great insights. I'll include that link in the show notes of the podcast if you'd like to check it out. Now let's launch off into the rest of our day with a really cool prayer from the N.A. Gray book that Leo will say for us. Go ahead, Leo.
Yeah, it's actually an A Gray book, which is a rough draft of a basic text, very first edition of basic text, and it's in step 3 on page 38. And I will read a few lines and then the prayer. Okay, it starts. It starts on page 38, line 24, and it goes like this: If you understand God to be simply whatever keeps the rest of us clean, that's fine. Ask that power to take care of you as it takes care of us, even if it makes you feel stupid. Go off by yourself and say silently, God, I've made a mess of my life. I can't solve my problems, and I ask you to take care of me and show me how to live.
Love it. Thank you, Leo. Keep coming back, everybody. Let's trudge this road of happy destiny together. Work it. You are worth it.
Standing still a moment, carving out this time, reflecting on the landscape of this life of mine. Peaks too high to conquer, streams still standing tall, despite the rough terrain. One like me survived the storms and walked through wind and rain. Still standing, I will fight the good fight. Still searching for glimmers of light. Feet still on the ground, I can still be found standing still.
My wings are torn and tattered, but I know I still can fly. I may not soar unfettered, I may not rise too high.
Recorded in the book of life and binded with the seal that I am bowed and broken, I am standing still.
Only God knows where the path of life will yet lead me. I do not even ask to know, I do not need to see.
It is enough to know that I'm loved and not alone. And with those truths, I thankfully march into the unknown. Still standing, I will fight the good fight. Still searching for glimmers of light. Feet still on the ground, I can still be found. Still standing, I will fight the good fight. Still searching